A family relaxing at home, alarmed by an ominous sound.
They heard a bump in the basement, some noise in the basement, kind of looked at each other. Did you hear that?
In an instant, their tranquil lives turned into a horrific nightmare.
They did observe Keith lying on the basement floor, bleeding, and there was a handgun near him.
The crime shattered everyone's sense of safety.
She was clearly shaken to her core.
I think we all expect to be safe in our homes. It was very shocking.
And led police to a sinister theory.
Was it a murder for hire? Was the individual upset at Keith for something? Was it a targeted homicide?
Was somebody that had a vendetta.
It quickly became very mysterious. We've got a whodunit case. I just need to find the right puzzle piece, and I finally found it.
Hi, I'm Nancy O'Dell. Today's Crime Exposé takes us to the town of Leeds, Wisconsin. This tight-knit community was the setting for a terrifying mystery when a doting father was gunned down in his own home with his wife and daughter just steps away. The entire community feared that until the perpetrator was caught, no one would be safe in their own home. It was a rainy Friday night around 9:30 when a shocking call came into the sheriff's office from Sarah Wolf. What did the caller report?
Our dispatch center received a 911 call from a woman at a rural home in Columbia County reporting that she believed her husband had just been shot in their basement.
Police raced to the scene. When officers arrived, was the gunman still in their home?
When they got there, they did not find anybody on scene. They made entry to the house, brought Sarah and her daughter out to a safe place, and then cleared the house and located Keith Wolf deceased in the basement.
They found Keith at the bottom of the stairs. He was positioned kind of at the base of the stairs, flat on his back, a large pool of blood around his head. They could tell that there was a wound on Keith's forehead. Keith did have a gun next to him.
Detectives asked Keith's wife to walk them through exactly what had happened.
She and her husband and daughter were in the living room eating a meal, watching television, when they heard a noise in the basement.
They kind of thought maybe there was an animal in the basement, a noise of something like moving around.
It was concerning to them to the point where Keith had gone upstairs to obtain a handgun and then go into the basement to check on the noise.
Sarah said she stayed in the living room with their daughter, who was sleeping on the floor in a tent while they had watched TV, and heard the confrontation where she thought Keith had yelled and then heard the gunshot.
She looked down the stairway into the basement and found her husband believed to be deceased with blood all around him. She never saw another person, and then she barricaded herself and her daughter in a room until we were able to get to her.
Detectives examined the basement door for clues to how the killer had entered their home.
We didn't have any signs of forced entry to the basement.
Next to the basement door, they made an intriguing discovery.
As they processed the scene, with it being a drizzly, rainy night, they found some shoe prints in the mud right near that back cellar door.
We found 2 footwear tread pattern impressions on the ground right outside that door. We were able to determine actually the brand and specific model of shoe. It was narrowed down to a Brooks Beast 16 or 18 or to a Brooks Ariel 16 or 18 style shoe.
Detectives knew the gunman had entered through that basement door. Did the crime scene investigators find any evidence on that door?
They found a smudge on the door frame for that cellar door.
On the door frame, there were 2 sets. One that we suspected was a palm or another touch point from somebody.
And the cellar door was the type that would lift. It would be kind of at an angle and you'd have to lift to open it. So it was in the area where you would put your other hand as you're lifting that door to open it to make entry into that basement stairwell. And they were able to take a DNA sample from that.
The DNA was sent to the lab for processing.
We were initially very hopeful that it was the killer's DNA.
The profile was uploaded into CODIS, the national DNA database.
When the crime lab ran that sample, there was no match.
Next to Keith's body, they made another critical discovery.
We located one fired shell casing in the basement. The shell casing was found near the base of the steps for the cellar doors.
The casing was sent in for an analysis.
Yeah, the shell casing they found was from a .40 caliber handgun, and that shell casing was actually submitted to the Wisconsin State Crime Lab, and through their testing, they were actually able to identify the type of firearm that it came from, and they told us that it came from a Smith & Wesson SD-40 handgun, so a very specific type of gun.
All the evidence led police to ask some hard questions.
We were thinking, is this a targeted homicide? Was the suspect who killed Keith known to Keith? Was this a homicide where somebody was mad at Keith and specifically came in to end Keith's life?
We certainly looked at, was it murder for hire?
There was no sign of a robbery or any other crime other than entry into the residence and killing Keith Wolf.
35-year-old Keith Wolf had been shot to death in his own basement by an unknown assailant.
So we had this individual who entered the residence, shoots and kills Keith Wolf, and exits the residence.
The homicide didn't appear to be the result of a robbery gone wrong.
We weren't able to find anything taken from the basement.
There was no sign of a robbery or any other crime other than entry into the residence and killing Keith Wolf. Nothing had been taken. It wasn't a robbery.
The Wolf's home was located in a remote part of town.
This property is very rural. It's not close to very many other homes. It's an older farmhouse that was well kept. It had probably about an acre lawn area around it with some outbuildings. The mowed grass area was surrounded by cornfields.
The medical examiner brought the last moments of Keith's life more clearly into focus.
It was a single gunshot wound to Keith's head that led to his death. The gunshot wound was from front to back. So Keith had been shot facing the suspect.
Based on the autopsy report, what conclusions could you draw about Keith's murder?
We really thought we had an individual that came into the house that sole purpose was to kill Keith Wolf. There's a difference between somebody shooting somebody in the back of the head and somebody shooting somebody in the front of the head while they're staring at this victim when they shoot the victim. It appeared very cold-blooded.
Most homicides are more targeted. You're more likely to know your assailant. With it being the rural area, to have a random person find the home and choose the home with the lights on at night to come in and try to attempt a burglary seemed low.
Detectives took a close look at Keith's wife, since she was the sole recipient of his life insurance policy.
I think with most homicides, the people who obviously are present when it occurs are the first people you had to rule out as being involved.
A lot of investigative work was spent examining their lives, building a profile of who Keith was, who Sarah was, and the connections that they had, their social connections, their hidden lives. We wrote numerous subpoenas, warrants, everything for financial records, both on Sarah's side and Keith's side.
But they couldn't find anything to connect her to the crime.
We were very quickly able to rule out that Sarah had any involvement in this.
They interviewed his co-workers at his construction business.
We had to get information from his co-workers. We talked to them quite a bit in regard to who Keith was and who would want him dead.
No promising suspects emerged, but they kept digging.
We examined all potential theories that there was some sort of domestic violence or some sort of drug nexus or some sort of gambling nexus or an ex relationship or anything to that effect, and we were able to rule through our investigation all of those out.
We really couldn't find anyone who would want to harm him.
We could not identify anyone who wanted Keith Wolf dead.
The doting father had truly been a beloved member of the community.
He was a hard worker. He was a loving father, very involved with his family. He had a lot of friends, a lot of close friends. He was very social, involved in sports.
Police pulled cell records trying to zero in on a suspect.
We really expanded our investigation into anybody that might have been in the area that night. We did hundreds of interviews based on cell phone records for people that their cell phones were putting them on the cell towers that serviced that area. And none of those people were identified as suspects either.
They fanned out, trying to think outside the box.
So part of our investigation involved serving search warrants to stores that sell Brooks running shoes in hopes that we could identify some person that had recently purchased these shoes that we could make a link to our crime.
As they hit dead end after dead end, detectives shifted their theory in an entirely new direction.
We began to believe that it was a random home invasion that resulted in a homicide.
Which made their investigation even more challenging.
I just needed the one right break.
We needed that break, either a tip or something just to come through to point us in the right direction.
And that break would ultimately bring them face to face with a cold-blooded killer. The DNA found at the scene was compared to every single person they interviewed.
Anytime we talk to somebody, we ask for a voluntary DNA sample.
As time went by and Keith Wolf's shocking homicide remained unsolved, the community feared their loved one could be next.
There was pressure from the community to get that answer as to why this happened and who did it and what the motive was.
Detectives vowed to find answers for Keith's heartbroken family.
I was very determined, like probably all investigators who have a challenging case, and it was difficult even in my off time to get it off my mind. You kept thinking back to, I need to get answers for Sarah and her daughter and try to provide them some closure.
Law enforcement focused on the evidence they could connect to the killer.
We had three critical pieces of evidence. One was the fired shell casing. One was the treadwear impressions of a potential suspect, the Brooks running shoes. And one was the DNA that we were able to obtain off of the door that led into the basement of Keith Wolf's residence.
The DNA found at the scene was compared to every single person they interviewed.
Knowing that we had a DNA sample, anytime we talked to somebody, we asked for a voluntary DNA sample.
But they were unable to find a match.
We weren't coming up with any individuals who matched that DNA.
Once forensic genetic genealogy emerged as a promising tool, investigators were convinced it would be the break they so desperately needed.
We kind of decided that the investigative genealogy was going to be our best bet at solving this, and really our best bet at keeping this case from becoming a cold case.
And the technique paid off. Through their painstaking efforts, they found a name.
Ultimately, in building the trees down and doing all the work, we were able to identify a Jason Kieski.
So once we had the name of Jason Kieski, we had a plan in place to interview Mr. Kieski as well as to search his home.
When detectives located 43-year-old Jason Kieski in a town about 80 miles east of the crime scene, they took note of what he was wearing.
Mr. Kieski was wearing Brooks running shoes that were the same type and brand as was identified outside of Keith Wolf's residence after the killing.
And there was more.
In his home was the Smith & Wesson SD-40 40 caliber handgun that ultimately matched to the handgun that fired this fired shell casing that killed Keith Wolf.
All the pieces of the puzzle had finally come together.
I just needed to find the right puzzle piece, and I finally found it. All of this is coming together really, really well to ensure that we're going to have a very solid case against him.
We had the who killed Keith Wolf, but we did not have the why it happened. The big question was why? Why did Jason Kieski kill Keith Wolf?
Kieski was brought in for an interrogation.
During his initial interview, he denied ever being in Columbia County, denied being at Bradley Road, didn't know anything about the crime.
Investigators turned up the pressure, and when he was faced with the overwhelming evidence against him, Kieski finally agreed to talk. He said he had set out that night to commit a robbery.
Jason Kieski admitted that he went into the residence to rob the individuals who lived at the residence to get money for gas because he was driving across the country.
Jason said that he was then kind of driving around and had driven past the residence, saw the light on, figured someone was probably awake watching TV, and really it was as good as any house that he could pick.
Did he tell you what happened once he was inside the home?
When he was in the basement of the residence, Keith Wolf came down the stairs. Mr. Kieski saw that Keith Wolf had a gun.
As Keith was coming down, he described that he had his gun raised. As Keith reached the bottom of the stairs, Keith started to raise his gun, and Jason then fired, saw Keith fall to the ground, and then immediately fled the basement.
In the end, Keith Wolf's murder had been a senseless act of violence. When you heard the chilling details of Keith's last moments alive, how did you feel?
It's absolutely heartbreaking because Keith was somebody who was doing what most people should be doing on a Friday night, spending time with their family, and to have somebody come in for no good reason and take his life was absolutely heartbreaking.
Jason Kieski was about to face justice for committing the horrific attack. For Keith Wolf's murder, Jason Kieski agreed to take a deal and pled guilty to first-degree intentional homicide. He was handed a life sentence with the chance of extended supervision after 30 years served. And now, it's time for today's Safety Spotlight. Approximately 1.65 million home invasions occur every year in America. And while it's terrifying to even imagine, safety experts recommend you develop a safety plan with your family and practice how you would respond in various scenarios. Statistics show burglars typically try to avoid contact, and so they often strike during the day when adults are at work and children are at school. But if you are home, you should try to avoid confronting the intruder if possible, as this may trigger a violent or deadly use of force. And for more details about home safety plans and what to do in the event of a home invasion, check out safehome.org. I'm Nancy O'Dell. For all of us here at Crime Exposé, please join us next time and stay safe.